So driving is a very complex task. Research says that the human brain was not created to multitask. And so we know that driving is the ultimate multitasking because there's so much stuff that we have to pay attention to. Not only do we have to know what all the gauges say in the car, we have to know everything that's going on around us, in front, beside, behind us. We have to know what all the laws of the land are. We have to know what signal lights are indicating to us. And there's split-second decisions that we have to make all the time. But we also have to have good judgment. We have to have the ability to see everything that we need to see. We also need the proper strength and reaction time. And it's normal for the aging brain and body to have slower reaction times. So that means that we're not going to respond to things as quickly as we used to when we were 25 years old. And the brain with dementia, there are significant changes in driving. So these are the reasons that seniors typically will stop driving. One is if they start to have visual issues. If they have cataracts or glaucoma or something like that, it does make it more difficult to drive. Sometimes people have emotional changes as they age, and so they become more nervous, or they even get angry at other people when they're driving. And then sometimes people with diminished cognitive abilities will also decide to stop driving. It's very common for us to have slower reaction time as we age, and so it's more difficult to respond to all the crazy drivers around us. And there's also medical conditions, including medications, that can interfere with a person's ability to drive, such as Parkinson's. It can make it very difficult for a person to drive safely. Sometimes people have financial difficulties as they age, and so it's very expensive to be able to drive a car, to buy one, to maintain the car, to pay for gas. All those things are very expensive, and so sometimes people will stop driving because of their financial difficulties. Some people will stop driving if they have a pattern of close calls. So they're not having accidents, but they're getting close to it. Sometimes people have lack of confidence. I know here in Southern California, our freeways are crazy. We always have construction going on, and people drive 80 miles an hour on the freeway, even though the speed limit is 65 or 70. So it's kind of scary to drive out there. And sometimes people will stop driving because their family or friends encourage them to stop driving. And then loss of license. Although I did test a gentleman who was 93 years old, he lost his license because he caused an accident. And his attorney asked me to test him. So when I tested him, I asked him for his driver's license. He gave me his California ID. And I said, this is not a driver's license, this is an ID. And he said, no, that's my driver's license. So what that told me is he had completely forgotten that he had his license taken away because of the accident that he caused. And he only had a California ID. So what changes typically as we age? Our ability to focus on close-up objects is more difficult. So for example, I've seen people really struggle to try to read what's on their medication bottle because the printing is so small. Or a menu in a restaurant. So it might be difficult for people to focus on that. And the ability to switch from near to far is really important because we have to know what all the gauges in the car say. We have to know what all the cars are doing around us. We have to constantly look back and forth. We have to scan constantly when we're driving. And it's more difficult to do that as we age. Also, our peripheral vision changes as we age. So normally we have a great deal of peripheral vision, but as we age, it gets smaller and smaller till a person only has about this much range that they can see and process the information. So it's not like a person is blind. It's just that they don't have the ability to see beyond this point. So everything that's going on in this section is not available to them because they can't see it and process that information. Our pupil reaction time also changes as we age. So that means driving from light to dark, for example. Our pupils are not going to react as quickly as they did when we were younger. Most people, as we age, have arthritis, and so that can make it difficult to maneuver the car. Oftentimes people have back and neck pain that can also interfere with driving. And then some people have a loss of high frequency sounds. I tested a woman who the driving instructor said, make a left turn at the next signal light. And just after he finished saying that, both of us heard and saw two emergency vehicles that were entering into the intersection. She tried to go out into the intersection. She did not see them or hear the sirens. And it just so happened when we were going the other direction, the same two vehicles were going through that intersection again. And again, she did not see or hear them. She had totally lost her high frequency level of hearing. It's also difficult to divide attention. So paying attention to the gauges of the car and all the cars around us and remembering all the laws of the land, all of those things, it's hard for us to switch back and forth as we age. Our brain signals start to slow down a little bit so we don't process things as quickly, and then our sensory perception becomes weaker. And especially if a person has something like peripheral neuropathy, so it means that they have no sensation in their feet, they won't be able to drive safely because they don't put their foot on the gas and brake pedal accurately, and it's difficult to switch between the two pedals. Also, as we age, the brain needs more information to make a decision. We need more time to do that. And so it makes people slower when they're responding to things as they drive. So how does dementia affect driving? The first thing that goes with dementia or starts to go is the short-term memory. And so I've talked to people who couldn't remember where they had planned to go, or they can't remember the sequence of the places that they were going to go, with the grocery store and the doctor's office and the different places that they need to go. Another thing that people with dementia have difficulty with is abstract reasoning. I hear all the time that they don't know how to use a car except for their own. They can drive really well in their own car, but they can't drive in the test car. And I always use a car. I work with a driving instructor and he has a car that has dual controls. I will not test people in their own car, even though it is good for them to be in their car because they're more familiar with it. But we need the safety of having the second brake. Also, people with dementia don't have good judgment and they won't self-regulate. I have seen repeatedly people who are very unsafe drivers, but they argued with me that they were still safe and they weren't having any issues. Yet the family will report to me the issues that they are having with driving. Reaction time is significantly slowed down with dementia, so people are going to respond to things much more slowly. Also, the executive functions can be impacted by dementia. So that means problem solving, making quick decisions, being able to change lanes, searching for new addresses. All those things can become difficult with dementia. And then something that's really impacted by dementia is your depth perception. And so it's difficult to tell how far away cars are, how fast they're coming, all of those things. It's difficult for people with dementia to discern that. And then the visual processing skills are also greatly impacted with dementia. Okay, so what are symptoms of concern? What do we need to look at? If a person is getting lost on familiar routes, so like the woman that I talked about, she went 2 blocks to her hairdresser and drove for 5 hours trying to find her way home. If a person is having slow reaction time or even near misses, even if they're not getting in accidents, but they're getting close to it, that's a symptom of concern. If they have errors with turning, changing lanes, backing up, signal light, all of these things, these are all indications that they may not be safe to drive anymore. And as I mentioned before, emotional distress happens frequently with people who have dementia. In the driving test, I've seen people get very angry at pedestrians for having the gall to walk in front of them because they believed that they had the right to go, even though in our state, the pedestrians have the right of way. Multiple fender benders. I tested one gentleman who I always ask them, have you had any tickets or accidents in the last 3 years? And he said no. And so he showed us his car because he was really proud of his car. And the entire car was full of dings and dents from him running into things. And what I found out is that He had actually been referred to me because he lived in a retirement community and he had run into many of the other retirees' cars, because every time he would go into the parking lot or leave the parking lot, he would play bumper boat. He would back up and hit a car and then go forward and hit a car, and he would eventually make his way out of the parking lot. So he had a car full of dents and scrapes. And then speed not matching. So I know I've mentioned this earlier, but if they drive too fast or too slow, these are symptoms of concern. So when to give up the keys? If a person is not following the speed limit, if they're driving 10 miles an hour or less under the speed limit, that's a reason for concern. If they don't stop fully, if they're easily distracted. So I always tell people when I'm talking to older adults, you need to be really careful about not having the radio on, not talking on the cell phone, not talking to passengers, because people can be easily distracted by the conversation and then they won't drive safely. Making erratic moves, reacting too slowly, hitting curbs, trouble with turns, tickets or accidents, getting lost. One of the things that I hear all the time from people that I test is that car came out of nowhere. And that is absolutely not true. That car came from somewhere. It's just that the person didn't see the car. Confusing the gas pedal and the brake, that happens frequently when I'm on the driving test too. And I've heard this a lot too. Those drivers are driving too fast. They should slow down. Well, it is true that a lot of drivers in Southern California drive fast, but people who have poor processing skills aren't able to manage seeing all the cars that are driving, no matter what speed they're driving. So assistance to stop driving. Doctors in the state of California are mandated reporters, which means that if they know a patient has dementia, they're supposed to report. Do you think they report? They don't. Most doctors do not report. What I found is that the doctors don't want to lose their patient, and so they will not report people to the DMV. That's why doctors refer to me, because then I'm essentially the bad guy and having to tell the person that they can't drive anymore. You can ask the DMV, you can ask police officers to help out. And I have a driving assessment program in Southern California, but there are other driving assessment programs in California and throughout the country. So it's important to find out where an occupational therapist is who is a driving expert and can help you out with this. One of the things that family members ask me, what can I do? What can I disable the car? Can I keep the person from driving? So you can take the keys away, but the problem is I've often found that people have another set of keys hidden somewhere. So if you decide to take the keys away, you've got to take all the keys away. Sometimes people just say, look, my daughter needs a car. My mom is not safe to drive anymore. I'm just going to give the car to my daughter and be done with it. But this can cause a lot of family turmoil. So you have to be very careful about the way that you handle this.